Okay. So what I want to look at quickly is something actually from Hanukkah, but we to go back to last week's parsha, but it does in some way reflect in this week's as well because it's about Yosef. And just to think about something as we go into the Shabbos of Hanukkah, but it's not only Shabbos and it's Rosh Chodesh. So it's a very powerful period of time. Rosh Chodesh is renewal. Hanukkah is the light of Torah. It's Chidush as well. So and Shabbos is Shabbos. So you can imagine how powerful the energy is of the day. And what's always struck me is that there's in the Gemaras in Shabbos. So there, as we know, that there are no specific masechta on or mishnayos on Chanukah. There's in actual fact there's only one real mishnah which contains contains halachas of Chanukah, but it doesn't even contain the halacha of Chanukah. It's a mishnah which is in Baba Kama, and the mishnah there discusses what happens if you if a camel that you are leading walks past a shop and has got flax on its back, and the flax somehow, because you're not careful enough, the flax goes into the shop and it touches the candles in the shop, and it goes on fire, and then it ignites the building around it, and it destroys everything around it. Who's liable for the damages? And there's a big discussion amongst the poskim as to what's talking about. Rabbi Yehuda says that if it's the Hanukkah candles, you putter. And there's a whole lot of learning. That's the only mishnah that has to do with Hanukkah. The rest of the rest of the learnings of Hanukkah are really based on different sayings of the great Tanaim, but they're no mishnahs as such. And as part of the whole discussions of Hanukkah, in the middle of it all, there is this discussion about, because it's said in the same name of Rabbi Tanchum, it said the discussion about the pit in which Yosef was thrown. So the Torah says that that when Ruvain wanted to, when he was worried, didn't want to kill his brother, so what he said, he'll throw him into a pit, and his idea was that he would come and take him out. And the Torah says that that the pit was empty, it had no water in it. And the Rashi says, they are quoting from Rabbi Tanchum, which is the place in the Gemara, just associated with all the discussion around Hanukkah. He says, but there were nechashim and akbarim. There were akravim, not akbarim, akravim. There were snakes and scorpions in this pit, even though there wasn't water. So the obvious question is, like, what is the Torah trying to teach me? So the pit was empty; it didn't have water, but it did have snakes and scorpions. And Yosef survives the snakes and scorpions, and he's pulled out and he's sold into slavery, and the rest of it is all history. But this is the foundation of everything, of the whole story of Yosef. And if it's the foundation of the story of Yosef, then it must also have real meaning for us. Why is that? Because we know that in this week's parsha, we've spoken about it right at the beginning of the week, that in this week's parsha, Yosef shows himself to be something that is totally unique. He's this ish asheruach elokim boy. He's this person that the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in him. And if he is that person that Paro recognizes as that, then it must be that there's something about this bor that he was thrown in originally, and he's then also thrown into the bor, into the pit that is the jail of the Sarat Tabachim. He's pulled out of that pit, and he becomes this person that he is. So there must be that you have to connect all of these different pits to one another. And I saw from some of the later commentaries that they're trying to understand a lot of the Hasidic commentaries. They're trying to understand, what does it mean v'aborek ein b'mayim? At that point in time, as Yosef was being thrown into the pit that he was being thrown into, we know that Torah is compared to water. So when it means that haborek ein b'mayim, it means that there's something about that pit that is reflective of the fact that at that moment in time, there was no real Torah hashkafa, no real Torah environment that was happening in that point. And all that was there are Nachashim and Akravim. What is the Nachash? The Nachash is the snake. The snake is is this animal that is the first movement against the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we know that with Adam and Chava, the snake is this one that tries to move them away from listening to the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if that's the case, so the Hasidic writings write that that we have to be careful in our lives. We have to be careful in our lives what we have. Do we have empty borot? Do we have these empty pits? Then the pit really is reflective of the spaces in which we go to. Do we have these empty pits which are ein bomayim, which don't have Torah in them? But if they don't have Torah in them, we must know they've not got nachashim and akravim. They have got definitely they have got dangers that are going to put us on the path in which we're trying to walk. Or are they pits which have a certain Torah hashkafa? If they have a Torah hashkafa, then we must know that we are able to be drawn out in the same way that Joseph was drawn out. And let's try and understand that, because I saw an unbelievable idea that in the dreams of Paro, Paro dreamt the same dream for 2 years, the exact same dream for 2 years. And that's why it describes the dream the way the Torah does in the way that it does. He dreams the exact same dream for 2 years, and it's only after 2 years that the process of Yosef coming out is activated. Why is that? The reason is because whilst he was there in the jail of the Sarah Tabachim, where he was being punished because of the thing that he didn't do with the wife of Potiphar, if we remember that just before the Sarah Mashkim, the chief butler, left, he said to him, "Remember me." Now, obviously, one has to do hishtadlus. One has to do one's best that one can in order to ensure that you can't just wait for Hashem just to do all these miracles. But at the same time, if all we are doing is relying on others, so then we're not relying on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so there's an opinion that says that for the 2 years that Paro had the dream was from the time the Sarah Mashkim left the jail until they pulled Yosef out. Yosef had not yet achieved the level of imunah and bitachon that he needed to achieve in order to be taken out. He was still in that empty bore that was not she'ein b'mayim, that didn't have the water, that didn't have the Torah, that didn't have the bitachon. Because if we understand that Torah is not just an intellectual understanding, it's not just an intellectual pursuit. Rather, Torah is the essence of everything. And Torah has to be founded on emunah and bitachon. It's got to be founded on our emunah, our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He gave us the Torah, and our bitachon and our trust in the chachamim, in the sages, that they've given us this process of learning in order to extract the real word of the Ribono Shel Olam. Oh, what does that got to do with Chanukah? So what that has to do with Chanukah is the fact that we say that the Chanukah candles are kiner mitzvah v'torah or. The ner is the mitzvah, but we know that the lighting of the candle is the mitzvah. That's the actual mitzvah itself, which you light the candle, which we know, therefore, that if the candles go out after you've lit them, if they would have normally have been able to stay alight, but for whatever reason they just went out there, the wind, whatever the case is, you don't have to relight them because you've done the mitzvah. But whilst the mitzvah is the lighting of the candle, we know that the neirot halalu kodeshaim va'en lanu reshus lishtamesh bahem ela liroisam bilvad, that we're not allowed to use them because they have kedusha. What is the kedusha? The kedusha is the light of the candles. The or of those Hanukkah candles is the thing that we're not allowed to use. You don't use a candle. You use the light of the candle. And because why? Because that light of the candle really represents the purest form of Torah. That purest form of Torah is the Torah that we have that comes as a result of our recognition of the great miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us by Yamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh, that Hashem does for us in those days during this period of time. And we know that there's an incredible halacha. The halacha is that if a person is benching and they forget to say Al Hanisim, because that can happen. And sometimes we bench, sometimes we do it and we don't think exactly what we're doing, and so we forget Al Hanisim. And that's okay, we forgot it. So on a specific halachic level, since Al Hanisim is just an additional hoda'at, an additional acknowledgement of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the miracles that He does for us. So therefore, you don't actually have to re-bench. If, for example, you left out Yalev Yavo, you would have to re-bench because that's a tefillah. But if you leave out Alanisim, you don't have to rebench. But says the Ramah that if you leave out Alanisim, what you can do is during the Harachaman, you say a special Harachaman. And the words of that special Harachaman are Harachaman, Hu Yaseh Lanu Nisim V'Niflaot. Harachaman, we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are the merciful one. You should please do for us Nisim V'Niflaot, miracles and wonders. And now it's very difficult to understand. What do you mean? How can we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do miracles for us? Because we know that you're not supposed to ask Hashem for miracles. We're not supposed to rely on miracles. But I think that if we can understand that it's not so much about the miracles, but rather it's about our recognition. As we light those Hanukkah candles, and we recognize with deep emunah that if we rely on the Ribono Shel Olam, and we really are able to, and we know the stories of how there was vinegar that she I can't remember, it was the daughter of I can't remember, one of the Tanaim, is she wrote, she lit the Hanukkah candles with vinegar instead of lighting them with oil. And she went to her father and she was crying. And the father said, what's the difference? The Hashem who makes the oil burn will make the vinegar burn. And so it happened. Okay, don't try that at home because it's not going to work. Because that's the level of emunah that he was at. But that's what Hanukkah is all about. It's all about our recognition of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the emunah, with the bitachon. And if we have that, then we can really perceive and understand Ner Mitzvah V'Torah Or, and then we can understand what it means to be pulled out of that pit, a pit which can be either filled with mayim, which is Torah, or a pit, and that makes us grow and that nurtures us, and we can take water from that, or a pit that is filled with nachashim and akravim, snakes and scorpions, which are dangerous and take us off from that path. So let's think about that as we light our sixth candle tonight. Very important. We're now towards the end of Hanukkah. It brings us increased light, increased joy, increased simcha, and increased emunah. Have a beautiful day, everybody, and have a beautiful Shabbos. And God bless. We'll carry on next week.
Thank you.
You
Thank you. Shabbos. Thanks.